Even though last week was goalie week in the NHL, we are still going to talk about the Super 16 tandem rankings that NHL.com put out. Where did Frederik, Andersen, and Pyotr Kochetkov finish? We're also talking about prospects as it is the showcase this Friday to start off the weekend. And then there's another PTO signing the Hurricanes have made. And this one kind of makes a little sense. All that and more on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Search Cast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Like I said at the top of the show, we are going to go over the NHL.com's Super 16 rankings, talking about goalie tandems. Where did Andersen and Kochetkov rank in their Super 16? Are they in the right spot, or should they be a little bit higher? Also going to talk about three prospects to watch at this weekend's rookie showcase as it starts on Friday down there near Tampa. And throughout the week, we're going to sprinkle in some other prospects as we go along so people can kind of have an idea of who to keep an eye on with this rookie showcase. And then finally, at the end of the show, we're going to be talking about another PTO thing that happened over the weekend and was officially confirmed on Monday as Kevin Labanc will be joining the Carolina Hurricanes. What's his career been like so far, and why does this one make kind of sense? And is there a possibility of him making the team here? But we are actually going to start with the Super 16 best tandems in the NHL ranking to celebrate, which was goalie week last week. Now, of course, if we all know from the previous ones that there is, first place gets 16 points. If you get a second place, so it's 15, third's 14, and so on and so forth. So to start with, number one is the Winnipeg Jets with Connor Hellebuyck and Eric Comrie. Very interesting for the fact that Connor Hellebuyck is basically plays almost 80% of the games. He did have, 62 starts last year, so a good bit of it, but they did get the number one spot with 198 points. Dallas starts number two with Jake Oettinger and Casey DeSmith. New York Rangers third with Igor Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick. Give you my thoughts on that. Washington Capitals at four with Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren. New Jersey Devils, Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen. Sixth, the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is very interesting. The fact that it's Stolars and, Joseph Woll. Tampa Bay Lightning with Vasilevsky and Jonas Johansson. Number 8, the Colorado Avalanche with Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood. Sergei Bobrovsky and Daniel Sarasov coming at 9 for the Florida Panthers. The Vancouver Canucks, Thatcher Demko and Kevin Lankinen. Then 11, Jordan Binnington, Joel Hofer. And then finally, the Carolina Hurricanes at the number 12 spot with 83 points with Frederik Andersen and Pyotr Kochetkov. This is what Jean-Francois Chamot said as the principal journalist at the LNPH.com, which is basically the French Canadian version of the NHL network, of the NHL.com. So it's the LNH version of it. The word tandem might not be enough with the Hurricanes. The past 2 seasons, they've had used 6 goalies. When healthy, Frederik Andersen is still legit number one, but the key is the sentence is healthy. Andersen played 22 games last season, 16 and 23-24, and 34 and 22-23. So Pyotr Kochetkov will still be pushing the start for the starter's role. Caden Primo, who will be looking for a fresh start in Carolina, might also see some action. With Andersen, Kochetkov, and Primo, the Hurricanes have some depth at the goalie position, but they are not one of the top 10 tandems in the NHL. I have them at 14. And of course, that's from Jean-Francois Chamot. But in terms of purposes, the Hurricanes actually finished 12th. Now, I understand where they're coming from with Frederik Andersen. He can't stay healthy. He played 22, 16, 34 games the last 3 years. Pyotr Kochetkov has won 50 games in the last 2 seasons, so he's done a lot of the yeoman's work. And then they add in Caden Primo, who's had some time with the Montreal Canadiens. Numbers aren't really the greatest, but he's most likely going to start the season in the AHL with Chicago Wolves after having a 22-win season with the Laval Rocket last year. Now, if Frederik Andersen or Pierre Kochetkov go down, we might see Primo. My only thing is, even with the fact of those, with Andersen's health and Kochetkov still pushing for starting role, have them at 10 and have them at 12 and not calling them a top 10 tandem in the NHL is a little kind of suspicious to me. When you look at 11, Jordan Benton's a very up and down goalie. Joe Holfer is okay for the most part. I mean, he did go 16. He had a 16-8-3 record last year with a 904 save percentage. But is that a tandem that you can really be happy about, though, that are ahead of the Carolina Hurricane? Even the Vancouver Canucks, who mightily struggled last season, Thatcher Jemko was hurt, came back, was okay. Kevin Labanc basically picked up a lot of the roles last year for the Canucks, but it was just an up-and-down season for the entire team for the most part. Yeah, Labanc is a very steady goalie, but, I mean, they could be a higher tandem if Demko could actually stay healthy and if he can be consistent and, can Labanc kind of run it back again. So even at 10 and 11, I'm kind of like, I don't really feel like that those two guys are better than the Hurricanes tandem when, for the most part, the tandem was almost kind of the more consistent position for the Carolina Hurricanes, even with the team in front of them kind of struggling. The goaltending really did a lot last year for the most part. Did they have some shortcomings in some games? Yes. But for the most part, the goalies kept the Hurricanes in a lot of games for most of the season. But even then, scrolling up, I mean, I'll say the Avalanche definitely did have a good tandem with Blackwood and Wedgwood. Once the Avalanche kind of swapped their goalie tandem from the start of the season to those two, I think that makes sense. Panthers, it's basically Bobrovsky carrying a lot of the weight on this one. Daniel Tarasov, I'm curious to see what he does. I mean, he didn't have the greatest numbers with Columbus, so even them, I could see that. My thing is the Toronto Maple Leafs goaltending. All you mainly hear about those guys is can they have the goaltending to get it done, and can the team in front of them get it done? I just don't know if Stolarz and Woll are those guys. And putting them in as a number 6 spot, I guess because the fact they're looking at them, the fact they've given up the 8th fewest goals in the NHL last year with 229. But even then, 6, I think Maple Leafs are a little high at 6. New Jersey, Markstrom was pretty good for the most part for the Devils. Jake Gallen was okay, but put them against the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes basically kind of took care of them pretty well in the playoffs. Washington, yeah, I mean, you look at Thompson, Charlie Lindgren played pretty dang good, but was it them or was it mainly because the team in front of them was just playing lights out hockey and just basically scoring at will? Yeah, I mean, they had some decent numbers for the most part. I know, at least with Thompson, 31-6-6 with the 249 goals against and 910. But Lindgren was 20-14-3 with a 273 and 896. His save percentage wasn't great, but his goals against average is okay. But even then, it makes it very interesting. And then even if you look at the Rangers, and they're acting like numbers can fool you. So if you look at Igor Shesterkin's 905 and Jonathan Quick's 893, you might think the Rangers have average goaltending. And they were 15th in the league last year with an 896 save percentage and 19th with a 309. But they're saying Shesterkin had the most shots against him, so take those numbers with a grain of salt. For me, it's kind of like even if that's the case, I just don't know if you look at the New York Rangers and what they did last year and be like, oh, yeah, it's the top 3 tandem in the league, when you had other teams behind them, including the Hurricanes, that kind of had better numbers for the most part. So for me, if I'm saying where the Hurricanes should rank in goalie tandems, I'd say at minimum 10. 12 for me is a little too low. Like I said, there's a few number of teams ahead of them that I listed off at the start of this of being, I don't see them being a better tandem. If Freddie can stay healthy, yeah, he's a top 10 goalie, maybe even top 5 in the league. I would say more top 10. And if Pierre Kochetkov's on his game too, he's also a guy who could be at least top 15. in the league, maybe pushing closer to top 10. So for me, it's if those guys are on it, that's easily a top 10 goalie tandem in the league. Saying that they're not is a little harsh for what they've done, for the fact that they've gone to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they've had some deep playoff runs in the last 3 years. That's with Kochetkov taking a lot of runs as of late as pushing for a star role. But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think that 12 is the perfect spot for the goalie tandem of Andersen and Kochetkov, or do you think they're in the top 10? I say for me, they're at least 10 at the bare minimum, but let me know what you think. So that being said, we're going to move on to the 3 prospects to keep an eye on for the prospect showcase this weekend. So stick around. We'll talk about that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. I know the game for the Panthers worked great this past weekend, but hey, you never know. Maybe they can kind of turn around and maybe surprise people. But are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And we are now moving on to talking about 3 prospects that Hurricanes fans should keep an eye on for this weekend, as the prospect showcase in Florida, just outside of Tampa, starts on Friday. Of course, we already talked about the fact that the Hurricanes play at 2 o'clock on Friday, 2 o'clock on Saturday, and they're off on that Sunday, and then they're in the early afternoon game on that Sunday, or on the Monday, the 15th. But 3 guys that we're going to start this with that I think fans should keep an eye on. One of them in particular, of course, is the most recent 62nd overall pick in the 2025 draft. He also signed his ELC not that long ago. It is Ivan Rybkin from Balakovo, Russia. Hopefully I said that correctly. 5'11", 205, a left shot center. Obviously, he's going to add a lot of depth to the Hurricanes center core, because as of right now, very thin for the most part outside of, when you look at Aho, Kakaniemi, Stahl, Jankowski, you can maybe add in Tyson Jost there, and then it's Ryan Suzuki. After that, most likely Rybkin. Last year, he actually did play in the KHL, the VHL, and the MHL over in Russia. In total, only played 25 games, had 1 goal, 13 assists for 14 points between Dynamo Moskva, Dynamo St. Petersburg, and an MHK Dynamo Moskva in the MHL, of course, the big club being Dynamo. And then he also played in 27 games for the Muskegon Lumberjacks of the United States Hockey League, where he had 19 goals and 30 points, finished with a +6. Did also have 70 penalty minutes, so he's scoring pucks and getting into the box a lot. But in the playoffs, how about this, though? 7 goals, 16 points in 14 games, was a +9 as he helped Muskegon win their Clark Cup title. And even in the playoffs, he also had 30 penalty minutes in those 14 games. So overall, in a span of, you want to say about 41 games, he had 100 penalty minutes. So Ivan Rybkin is no stranger to taking some trips to the sin bin. However, this dude is not afraid to score some goals and be an impact player. Like I said, in 27 games in the USHL, he was over a point per game, had 30 in the regular season, and then was over a point per game in the playoffs, having 16 and 14 games, and finished with a +6 in the regular season and a +9. I'm really excited to see what this guy can do, because there is a lot of offensive upside to him, while the defense still might need a little bit of work. But he does have a really great one-timer, quick release on the wrist shots, and he is very, very good in tight situations. Like I said, need a little bit of more work on the two-way side of things, but overall, Ivan Rybkin is definitely someone to keep an eye on. I think he'll be very, very fun to watch for sure for fans who want to keep an eye on prospects for the showcase that's coming up. The other player we got to mention, I think this is probably one of the top guys that I think could make a push to make the Carolina Hurricanes this upcoming season, or might be one of the first call-ups if he doesn't make it at camp. And, of course, that is Bradley Nadeau, the winger slash center, 5'11", 172, the right shot, 30th overall pick in the 2023 draft of St. Francois de Madawaska out of New Brunswick. Another great guy to keep an eye on for sure, especially the fact of what he did last year with the Chicago Wolves in his first ever pro year of a full season, really. How about 64 games, 32 goals, 58 points, and he was one of very few rookies or just teenagers to score over 30 goals in his first season, or just 30 goals in general. You'd love to see them from Bradley Nadeau. Did play in 2 games for the Carolina Hurricanes last year, did pick up his first point, and it was an assist. In the playoffs, however, he played 2 games, didn't really score any points, and the Wolves got knocked out in their first round in their best of 3 against the Rockford IceHogs. He did finish a -3 in the playoffs. In the regular season, did finish with a -20. Now, given the fact that he played a lot of minutes for the Chicago Wolves, and it was a very, I would say, kind of a slow start for the team, but they got better as the year went along. Because, I mean, it's your first year back of a reaffiliation with the Wolves. You know, a lot of young guys on this Wolves roster. First year coach Cam Abbott with his staff. So there's a lot of growing that this team had to do. But for the fact that he was top 3 on the team in points, led the team in goals with 32, ended in 64 games, and the fact he was also a, all AHL rookie for the league, I think that says a lot. So I think Bradley Nadeau, for me, and I know a lot of people are very excited to keep an eye on this guy, he's definitely going to be one of probably the top guys for Carolina Hurricanes prospects to keep an eye on when it comes to what is the next step for them. So I definitely say you have to keep an eye on Bradley Nadeau because he's probably one of the first call-ups, or probably one of the guys that if he really wants to make a hard charge out of camp, I think he's definitely going to be one of those. Now, I have talked about him a lot, and of course, it doesn't hurt to talk about him more, and I think everyone knows how much I like this guy for what he can do, and he's already kind of showing what he's done so far with the Ottawa 67s in some preseason games, and of course, that is Filip Ekberg, the Swede winger. I'm very excited for him. Of course, 221st in the most recent draft. Plays left wing and right wing, 5'10", 172 out of Uppsala, Sweden. Last year with the 67s, 53 games played, 16 goals, 45 points, 8 penalty minutes only in was a +5. The thing that really stands out, though, how about the World Juniors? 7 games played, 10 goals, 18 points, was 6 penalty minutes, but was a +6. He led for Sweden in that entire tournament in goals with 10 and points with 18. He is a really good tactician on the front end of things, finds open lanes, finds those teammates, does have a sneaky shot, and has some good speed as well. And already played some first-line minutes, playing some third-line minutes, kind of, jumping up and down the 67s. Early roster for their preseason games for the OHL. Did play North Bay recently and took care of business. Of course, it's preseason. However, it's still good to see that he's getting a lot of top 9, top 6 minutes. Like, everyone knows how much I like this guy. I was hoping the Hurricanes draft him. He's really good, very underrated. And the fact that you're adding a very offensively minded Swede back to the roster, can play on both sides. So if you're looking for 3 guys, in my opinion, that we're doing the small prospect watch for the upcoming showcase this week, Ivan Rybkin, that's kind of a no-brainer there. Same thing for Bradley Nadeau. He's probably the number 1 prospect on the Hurricanes right now. If you're not talking about, Alexander Nikishin's already with the team most likely. So if you're talking about like the next prospect that it's going to be making for his call-up, or if someone's going to make an impact, it's probably going to be definitely Bradley Nadeau. Then, of course, another guy, everyone's heard me talk about him a lot, written about him a lot over at the Hockey Writers too. It is Filip Ekberg. I know it's all forwards, 1 center, couple wingers, but you know what? They say offense is fun to watch, and these are going to be 3 guys to keep an eye on for sure. Now, talking about forwards, the Hurricanes made some news over the weekend, and it was confirmed on Monday that they signed Kevin Labanc to a PTO deal. What does that mean for the Canes, and what does that mean for him? Stick around. We'll talk about that on the Tuesday edition of Locked on Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked on Hurricanes, your team every day. So we are going to be talking about Kevin Labanc, who got signed recently by the Carolina Hurricanes on a PTO deal, played last season with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and before that, he spent a good number of seasons with the San Jose Sharks. So 8 years with the Sharks from the 16-17 season at 21 to the 23-24 season at 28. In his 8 years with the Sharks, in 478 games, 82 goals, 225 points, was a minus 88. 13 power play goals, 15 game winners. He also averaged 14 minutes and 24 seconds of ice time, 146 block shots, 382 hits. Now, in his 1 year with Columbus, 34 games played, 2 goals, 12 points, and basically averaged 10 minutes in 30 seconds, 14 blocks, 29 hits with the Jackets. Of course, if you look at the games he's played over the last few seasons, 72 back in 22-23, 46 games in 23-24, of course, this last one, only 34 games, had some up and down numbers, dealing with a lot of injuries, stuff like that. Even going back to 21-22, only played in 21 games. The last time he's played a full 82-game season was back in the 18-19 season. Around the season before that, he played in 77 games. So there are some okay numbers. Like I said, 9-year career, 512 games played, 84 goals, 237 points, 71 even strength, 13 power play goals, 15 game winners, and like I said, 14 minutes and 8 seconds of average ice time. Of course, with the Sharks, 14-24, 10-30 with the Jackets. Now, what does that really say for him and the Carolina Hurricanes? He's hoping to make his 10th year, playing in his 10th season in the NHL. Was originally, like I said, drafted back in 2014 by the Sharks. This will be very interesting of how this works out. Like I kind of said with Oliver Shillington and Giovanni Smith, this is definitely having an extra body for training camp, for preseason games to see what he can do. It'll be very interesting to see how this works out for Kevin Labanc, because the fact, like I said too, he is a right winger, plays possibly left too. He has a right shot. Outside of that, I'm not really sure what we're looking at for Kevin Labanc. Could he make the roster? It's not impossible. It's not zero, but I think it's very slim. Like I said, for Shillington and even Smith, I think this is kind of the same thing for Labanc. Could be a sneaky guy to have if you want an extra body. Maybe he starts here in Chicago. Maybe someone you bring up. Maybe if he shows off a lot more, maybe there's a roster spot. But it's like, who is he going to take it from? Is it going to be probably Tyson Jost? Might be the only one I could think of that Labanc might take a spot over. Because other than that, you're not taking William Carey off the roster because he's got another 5 years of his contract. Not going to take Mark Jankowski off because you love what he can do as your fourth line center. Same thing, you can't take off Robinson. You're already down to 7 defensemen. That's with Mike Riley in there. So I'm not saying it's impossible for him to take a roster spot. It's just going to be a very tight window to hit with the guys that the Hurricanes already have. And you've heard me say it before. This team is pretty much 99.9% completed. Unless they make a move for a second line center, or I just don't see another move being done where someone comes in, maybe takes another roster spot. I think the roster is somewhat set, barring injuries, knock on wood. Hopefully no one does. But Labanc does have some good tendencies, does have a nice two-way game. Like I said, you could tell he doesn't really hit a lot of people. He's not a big bruiser type of guy. I mean, 34 games last year. They have 29 hits, 61 the year before, 70 back in 22-23. So he's got some hit numbers, but not a lot of them. He does eat a lot of pucks for the most part, 28 back in 22-23, 17 and 14. So he eats a good amount of pucks for blocking him for the most part. Like I said, he did have 13 power play goals, but he hasn't scored a power play goal since 22-23, and he only had 2 that year. The most he's had was back in 17-18. So Labanc is a good, okay player. His most points was 56 back in 18-19 when he played 82 games. Other than that, 33, 28, 6, 33, 9, and 12. If you're talking about a guy who's played more than 50 games in the last 3 seasons back in 22-23, he had 33 points. Granted, it's not a great Sharks team for the last couple of years. Of course, he played on the Jackets. We only played in 34 games. So this is kind of like I said, with Shillington and Smith, same thing for Labanc. It's a body, someone to use for training camp, someone to use for the road games for the preseason. Like I said, I'm never going to say it's impossible to crack a roster for the Hurricanes, but it's not impossible. It's not 0, but it's a very slim margin, like 0.00001% that he might make it. It just depends on, like I said, barring an injury, which I don't think anyone's really going to have one, and if, what else is going to happen. So it'll be very interesting to see what the Hurricanes do on that front. And even what Labanc can do. Can Labanc show that he can be that guy to maybe take a roster spot? And I think that's going to be it might be a tough hill to climb for him just to do that. Because I said, if he makes it, if there's no injuries involved, who does he take over for? You can't take out Jankowski. He's probably your best fourth line center you got right now. You can't take out Carrier. Yeah, you're giving him $2 million, but that's a 5-year deal in one way. The only guy you can really kind of take out of this roster is Tyson Jost. And unless Jost just kind of falls off a cliff or doesn't really show it in training camp, and they're like, hey, maybe we got something here with Labanc, I say that's the only guy that might have a legitimate, maybe worry to not making the roster, and maybe someone Labanc can take over, but even then, I just don't think it's possible. But hey, you never know. Like I said, it's never impossible. It's just a very slim margin. But it'll be interesting to see what the Hurricanes do. So, because as of right now, in terms of their PTO deals, they got Shillington, they got Smith, and now they just pick up Labanc. And Labanc is a solid veteran for the most part. Like I said, it's been 8 years with the Sharks. Spent last year with the Jackets. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here in camp, but it's good to know that we're kind of slowly getting there. We're getting closer, having more hockey back. Like I said, we got the prospect showcase this weekend, and then we got training camp, and then preseason starts. So before you know it, as of right now, we're going to be 30 days away. We're exactly 1 month away from the start of the hockey season. I don't know about you guys, but I am ready for it to be back. But that will be the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen of the day. For your listen. Check out the Locked On NHL podcast for their season, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. You also can find me on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where I do have link trees in my bios to where you can find all of my written content at thehockeyguys.com. I have been pretty busy over the last few days. Make sure to go check out all the recent stuff. If you want to check out my other podcast, The Surgecast, you can find it on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to follow, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it is Locked On Hurricanes. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up. Tell me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Caniacs so they can be everydayers just like you. But thank you to everyone who did tune into the Monday show where I talked to Hurricanes President Doug Warf about the jerseys. If you haven't listened to or watched it yet, make sure to do so after this episode if you have not done so already. It was a great conversation with him. Got some cool insights on what was going on into the process, and he does show the last prototype before they did get approved, so make sure to check all of that out. But I hope everyone enjoyed the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Tuesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.